All right. Seeing Sorry, I was so happy to have a gavel. Seeing a quorum of voting members, I call the October 15th Student Achievement Committee of the Whole meeting to order. Everyone, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I like it better when the kids are here. Do it. Treasurer Augustin, please call the attendance roll.
Mr. Craig.
Here.
Mr. Crossett. Here. Mr. Lindy. Ms. Mapp.
Here.
Mrs. Weinberg. Vice President Bolton.
Present.
President Moffett.
Here. Superintendent Murphy, please introduce our first presentation.
Yes, ma'am. We have a presentation today that we're super proud of, and our Director of Curriculum is Emily Campbell is going to come and walk us through a CPS Social Studies instructional practices highlighted at our DBQ conference recently. Emily?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for having us. We're really excited to share this work that our Social Studies Department were highlighted about over the summer. A couple years ago, when we initiated our Social Studies readoption, we were looking carefully at our DBQ usage, which is called document-based questioning, and the Social Studies team put some real strategic work around that. One, it had not been a part of our initial adoption cycle, and so we wanted to make sure that teachers saw it as our core, and then they did various other things, and their usage went from, let me get this right, 86% increase in usage from their strategic work. So DBQ reached out to them and asked about, what did you do? How did you get this? And wanted them to come to their conference with other leaders to share all of their strategy. Amongst that, they made this video. Our teachers can share a little bit more about DBQ than I can, so Rob?
What I like about the DBQ project is that it starts with an open-ended question. And I found it was a great way to support teachers in doing what every teacher believes is good teaching. Getting students to analyze, getting students to think critically, getting students to develop their own opinions and be able to defend them.
We look at our job as teaching kids how to investigate and how to be able to see something unfamiliar and put context to it.
Being able to think, being able to apply different sources, different ideas to a question is probably the most important thing, because you're quite literally teaching kids to think.
Inquiry-based education is a valuable way to teach social studies because it allows the students to have their own perspective and allows them to think for themselves rather than being told, this is what you need to think.
Free suit and desperation. What do you do? Right?
You know, there's a lot of assumptions that we have in our society about what our economy is doing and our relationship to one another. Well, if we do a deep dive into the Great Depression, for example, we can learn from that extended period of time of this traumatic event.
The other day I paid $7.89.
And I think we assume less, we're curious about more, we're looking for parallels where there are parallels, and we learn from that.
Sure, it's a paper we write at the end. Sure, there's some really great questions that kids ask, but it's also really, really nice because the students are able to have a conversation.
And tell me, what question are we trying to answer?
And it fosters debate, it fosters new ideas.
You're looking at maps, you're looking at charts, you're looking at data. And these are all skills that are coming up across all curriculum.
So DBQ Online, as a natural evolution of this, The tools are very straightforward. Extract the meaning, wonderful little ways to annotate, whether it be sticky notes or highlighting that I can use to identify for myself and a teacher what I see. How can I extract the meaning? What am I learning from this little thing? And then at the end, I put it all back together again. I've analyzed, and now I can bring it all together in a cohesive whole.
There's no right or wrong answer in how kids answer the question. It's how they defend their work.
They're looking for the student to be able to look at the question, look at the documents, and start finding the pieces of evidence that will defend their answer.
And that's an important skill for kids to learn.
Not to mention, if you got a science teacher or a math teacher in the room, they're also saying, oh, okay, we've talked about this in math. Oh, in science, we talk about this fourth quarter. And then you can break it down even further where it talks about the economy. It talks about basic geography skills. It talks about relationships of nations. It's kind of like the definition of cross-curricular.
We are actually providing the nuts and bolts that an ELA teacher needs in order for these kids to be successful.
So it's a comforting sense of I know where I'm going, I know what I'm doing, and I'm familiar with it, regardless of the topic of the DBQ.
Can somebody raise your hand and tell me, is this a primary source or a
And
secondary?
I think one of the most beautiful things is seeing the kids, make comparisons to their own lives.
Yeah, the subject matter of history is important in and of itself. It's important that we remember, names, that we remember narratives. But I feel like the most critical piece of that is how do I take a narrative, how do I take a person, understand the context within which they live, the challenges that they faced in their day, and then as I learn from them, can I apply those challenges to present day, civic conversations that we need to have.
So it's kind of this thing that's expanding with Cincinnati Public. New teachers are being introduced to it. Us old teachers are using it more and more. We're constantly working on professional development, sharing new ideas, making modifications, and just using it as an expansion to teach not just social studies, but all different curriculums.
So our social studies team was invited over the summer to present to other leaders around the nation who also use this high-quality instructional material, and they helped us create this video. The three teachers that you saw were actually some of our initial teachers when the social studies team did a deep dive, who's using DBQ, so that as we expand this and make sure that all students have access, teachers are learning from other teachers. And then the last thing, just to share, this document-based questioning came from advanced placement U.S. history teachers who saw a need to increase writing and being able to defend arguments and defend what they were reasoning through. And so this is a teacher-initiated instructional material that we still have a lot of work to do, but have made some progress with. So.
Thank you. Some of my favorite people were in that video, so congratulations. Board members, do you have any questions, comments? Board Member Crossett.
Yeah, can you give me an example of a document? I mean, is it like the Constitution or something?
Yep, so it's a combination of primary documents and secondary documents. So they pair them together, and then students have to think about what came from that primary work. So Constitution, what's another great primary document that people use in social studies?
Like the Gettysburg Address?
Yes.
I'm not the only former social studies teacher up here, but I'm one of them.
Yes,
So
you
you can use all kinds of great things. You can use graphs, tables, population figures. You can use political cartoons. You can use photos. You can do works of art, excerpts from short stories. I mean, there's no limit.
Got it, thank you, thank you.
And I didn't want to interrupt Mr. Crossett if he had more that he wanted to say.
Sorry, what?
I didn't want to interrupt you. I was going to say something to Ms. Campbell, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
I'm finished, you go.
I just said, just that this is great stuff, and thank you. And I hope it makes a big difference, and it's important.
Thank you.
So I think another former social studies teacher put this on here. I got you.
I don't know who that could be.
She's trying to point to somewhere else, but she's not going to deflect that. But so, Board Member Lindy, Vice President Bolton, but we're going to go to Board Member Matt. Go ahead.
well, as a former social studies teacher.
Another one.
There you go. We have a social studies caucus on this board. It's not only just a Walnut Hills caucus, we have a social studies caucus on this board.
We're surrounded.
I'm thoroughly impressed with the work around the DBQ project and really extending our students' learning beyond just kind of that surface level of maybe multiple choice or fill in the blank, but really allowing them to take a deep dive into that critical thinking, aspect of learning and where they are truly able to take ownership of the work, right? And I love that it's not about whether answer is right or wrong, but really understanding and having reasoning behind and being able to defend the work. I truly appreciate that and value that. And I just love that this is an opportunity that we're providing our students to be able to stretch their growth. I'm a firm believer in students don't know, or kids don't know what's hard unless adults tell them it's hard, right? And I think this is truly an example of that. So thank you for the work that is being presented to our students. Thank you for the teachers that have been initiating and propelling this work forward as well. My question is, can you speak to, you said the usage is up to 86%, or what was the baseline and where are we at now?
Yep, so it's an increase. Over 4 years, 86% increase in usage. So 4 years ago, we were at 40,000 users. That's inclusive of teachers and students. And now we are at 80,000. That is really reflective more in the 7-12 space. DBQ goes down to 5th grade, and we do need to do some more work in 5th and 6th grade.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for sharing that context. My only other question, as we talked about, the types of works that you're able to use this type of material or curriculum with, I know that the board adopted years ago our African American curriculum. Is this embedded into that work, or is it a separate piece of curriculum?
So the African American, the texts and things like that we incorporated in every unit ended up in our ELA curriculum. And so this is paired in our social studies, where they also have done some critical analysis of their resources, but not to the level that ELA originally did. And then we do work to offer African American history at all of our schools. And then there are resources that they can use within those courses.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for sharing that. And again, I love the cross-curricular piece because, again, learning isn't in a silo, but it's across, different sectors. And so I like that there's been a focus on that. So thank you.
Great. Now you.
Now me.
Vice President
If I
Bolton.
can. Thanks for presenting today, and of course, I think this is so valuable. I love when Cincinnati Public is highlighted by folks as us being the leaders in this particular effort. The DBQ, as some of us know and you've referenced, it used to just only be a part of advanced placement tests, whether it's European history or American history or comparative politics or what have you. And the idea of using DBQ as an actual curriculum enrichment and enhancement about source material and putting things together and increased writing, I think it was a great idea on their part to create kind of this cottage industry. And I think we can remember the last 2 budgets that we've had to work on. DBQ has been almost, frankly, a separate item as well, or a line item for social studies adoption, or even separate from social studies adoption. I'm glad we're doing it. I'm pleased too that it goes across all of our high schools, and it isn't just about the advanced placement kids learning these skills. And I've heard a significant amount of talk about the DBQ is this emphasis that many of us have about how do we get kids ready or grown-ups ready to understand sources, which are valid, which aren't valid, or how do you put different sourcing together in order to come up with something. And I think DBQ is expanding. And I'm glad our kids and our teachers were highlighted to that African-American course. I know we do that, which is great. And you'll recall a few years ago, when it was first introduced by the college boards, there was pressure to get rid of AP African-American history. And if I recall, we in student achievement basically, and I won't say it was a directive, but I think we said to the administration, we want you to continue to pursue this, regardless of what the pressures are nationally. So it wasn't just DEI that we started to kind of be very assertive, but I think on that course as well. So I appreciate this, and I think we're big dogs. I think we are leading the way. And I love DBQ and what it does for all of our kids. Thank you for sharing.
I always go last, and everybody always says everything I want to say. So kudos to what everyone has already said. I just will add that this just reminds me of the Socratic method of teaching and learning. I was going to go into law school a long time ago, and it just reminds me of that type of, not necessarily right or wrong, but just defending your position. And that is such an awesome critical thinking method, and I'm glad that our kids are getting it. And they're getting it at schools that were represented, which people need to know that too. So
Yes.
thank you for all the work that you and the team are doing. You guys are doing a great job. We need to hear more of it, so thank you.
Thank you.
All right, was that it? All right. Superintendent Murphy, please introduce our next presentation regarding the guardrails.
Yes, ma'am. So up next, we have Mr. Mike Turner, who is going to take us through guardrails 1, 2, 5, and 6 today.
Good afternoon, everybody. I apologize ahead of time for sniffles, but it's just allergies, so.
As long as you're not contagious, you can sniffle on.
No, it is this time of year, so. So as Superintendent Murphy said, we have the updates, and so we'll just jump right into the first slide. Please, Rob, we just wanted to give a progress status update as of October the 5th, because we needed to have a date to be able to pull everything together to get in the format to submit to you guys. And we do have action steps that the owners of each piece of this work have developed. Knowing there's ongoing conversations about the strategic plan and how this all fits, some of this, of course, could be used as baseline inputs for that strategic plan. And then, of course, we always welcome board guidance and suggestions and all of that with each one of these. And so moving right into the first guardrail 1A, the progress on that is the percent of high school students participating in arts and athletics-based extracurricular activities. As of October 5th is 27%. The next slide shows the breakdown by grade level. I will say that this is earlier than last year, so we are very close to the number last year, which was reported later than this one. So there weren't necessarily any red flags with this, but the owners of this do have some action steps that they identified that they want to make a priority, and those are on the next slide. So first of all, always celebrating and recruiting people for multi-activity participation. That certainly, as being a former principal where we had lots of students involved in not just one activity but multiple activities, that builds momentum, it builds excitement. Because we have had a change with 7th and 8th grade moving out of many of our buildings, there needs to be a strengthening of opportunities for the feeder pathways, because some schools now have 9th graders, and they may or may not have been there as 8th graders. Most of them probably were, but as we look to the future, they definitely want to make sure between arts and athletics that they are looking at those natural opportunities going from 8th grade to 9th grade. Data workflows is always a big thing about how to keep track of this. And so there's going to be, there has been and will continue to be a very refined workflow effort with principals and ADs with actionable summaries because it is a monster in many respects, keeping track of students at any given point in time because things change on a daily basis. So the data that I'm presenting to you now, I'm sure if we could magically look at it right this minute, it will be different one way or the other slightly because students move in and out of activities. And then connecting resource coordinators and ADs, especially since everybody's under the same umbrella of CPS now, to expand opportunities for all students. Really want to stress with this data, because it is as of October 5th, it does not reflect from the athletics side many of the students who will move into fall sports here in a few days. And so that is action step 1A. 1B is a guardrail around the district survey, and we have 2 or 3 of those today that will pop up in different sections. This one is the percent of elementary school students who have a favorable response for sense of well-being on the district survey. 70.6% is that number, and that, again, that is not a drastic departure from last year. I actually think it's a little higher than last year about this same time. The action steps that go into, we have one more. We have our subgroups, pretty much all of our subgroups, and I think you will see that there is not very much variation between all of these subgroups. There is some of a difference, but it's not that one of the subgroups is drastically off from the overall percentage. So we did want to show you those percentages by subgroup. So some action steps, very specific for this one. Just to give you an example, if 600 more students moved to favorable, that would get us at a 75% well-being. When we have thousands upon thousands of students in the district, 600 really is a small amount, and that just shows that what a small change of students can do to move us. Much of this work is connected to PBIS, and so again, maintaining what is already there, continuing huddles with school social workers, and then expanding the use of the collection database. What that refers to is the school-based people have a database that they keep track of with students. And so as we are able to hone in on students and making them more successful in the school setting, then their own sense of well-being will be reflected in the data. And then always providing targeted building supports, whether those are hands-on things, it could be people-related things, and then time, of course, is always something that we covet. And then scheduling PD windows that avoid conflicts is a specific action step when it comes to working with the adults that implement PBIS, which has a dramatic impact on students' sense of well-being. So that is guardrail 1A and 1B. 2A is looking at the percent of students across the entire grade spectrum, Black, Hispanic, and multiracial students with a category 2 infraction compared to white students. So when we look at this data, there's a variety of ways that this data could be displayed for you. One of the things to keep in mind, and we do realize that the guardrail says percentage, but when you start looking at strict percentages, it does not take into account the varying differences in the percentage of students in those categories. So I'm working with Dr. House, what we thought would be a good way to show this data and especially show you the differences between the subgroups, which is what I would stress, is if we pare this down to the average number of infractions per student. So if we looked at all the white students in the district up until October the 5th, 1.8 average number of Category 2 infractions per student. But if we look at Black students, that goes to 4.6. Hispanic students, 0.2, so very low, and then multiracial students, somewhere between white and Black students. If we looked at this from a percentage standpoint, even though we would be looking at percentages, you're still going to see the same magnification between white and Black students. For example, I mean, looking at this data, one way that you could look at it to say is that Black students are between 2.5 and 3 times more likely to have a Category 2 infraction than their white counterparts. The next one, 2B, is very specific about Black male students with Category 2 compared to white male. And so when we look at this, you'll only see 2 lines. White male students, average number of infractions per student, 0.7. And then Black male students, 4.99. So you see a pretty dramatic difference between white male and Black male. If we looked at percentage of referrals and kind of extrapolate that to take out the differing amounts of students in those categories, you're still going to see that magnifying factor between those 2 groups. So the action steps with that, I don't think will be any surprise to anyone. It's continuing and strengthening the targeted professional development in a variety of things, code of conduct, also restorative practices, and then trauma-informed care is in there because many times students are having infractions not just because they decided this is what I want to do on this day. They have underlying factors that play into what happens kind of from the inside out, and so trauma-informed care is a big piece of that. Notice in front of coaching is the word strategic when it comes to restorative practices. This does require a drilled down effort, and I will say that the Positive School Culture team with Dr. House have drilled down deep. I also failed to say that Josh Harden and Maria, and I'm gonna butcher Maria's name. Say it again. Kitsini, drilled down on the athletics and the arts side of things too, so I failed to give them credit. But Dr. House and her team have drilled down in the data, and they've also drilled down in these action steps. And again, it's strengthening partnerships with communities and mental health providers. So 2C is a survey response. And the percent of students in grades 7 through 12, and again, this is what the guardrail was originally written as, so this is specifically for students in grades 7 through 12 who have a favorable response for teacher-student relationship on the survey is 83.4%, which is somewhat higher than this time last year. So the action steps with that, again, is if we could just shift 100 students, we would be at 285 to 90%. But again, you see the same, many of the same sort of action steps as the previous survey question, continuing the monthly PBIS professional development, our district themes, and all of the things that we see out there about what's great about Cincinnati Public Schools, like the video that we just saw. I mean, that makes students feel like they have a great relationship with their teachers, all of the huddles and that intervention database. And then we are also looking very keenly on the capacity of staff, clarifying multi-tiered systems of support, MTSS and PBIS roles. Many people think that MTSS is only looking at academics, but we actually look at positive school culture, social emotional learning, chronic absenteeism, all of that plays into MTSS, and then embedding SEL, not just part of the time, but in daily instruction. So now we're skipping all the way to guardrail 5A, and I do want to say that 5A, B, and C are all lumped together, that data on one slide, but 5A deals particularly with K-12 students with chronic absenteeism. That's as a group. 5B are K-12 Black students with chronic absenteeism, and then 5C is K-12 Hispanic students with chronic absenteeism. So when we look at our percentages, want to remind you that chronic absenteeism is about 10% of the days for the school year, but for this purpose, the way they calculated the data is 10% of the days up until October the 5th. So this does not mean that students have already achieved chronic absenteeism for the year, but if we looked at students who missed 10% of the days in the time segment, we have 36% of all students, 43% of Black students, and 36% of Hispanic students. I did go back and look at the data last year that was presented the first time, and it is higher than that, but not much higher than that. So this is lower if we look at the time segment of the beginning of school up until around October the 5th. Again, if we check that with a magic wand as of today, that percentage would perhaps be higher, but we did not want to scale it out for the entire year because that would give a false narrative as far as where we stand. So that is if we just look at 10% of days in the time period. So action steps. I mean, early warning indicators are a big point of conversation. That isn't just about schools and what they do with students and school social workers. It's also conversations with IT that occur. How do we automate like a bubble list for at-risk students? It's making what we need kind of boots on the ground work with the IT systems that we have. Tightening daily attendance taking and documentation. And I heard Superintendent Murphy say that Saturday. I think you pointed this out Saturday in the session, is that, you know, sometimes a student might be in the nurse's office and we've got to clean those things up. And that's really about monitoring that validation compliance. And then providing targeted support to focus schools in this action step refer to schools that are having the most problems with chronic absenteeism. And then really advancing the updated attendance policy timeline. So what that refers to is the House bill that we've talked so much about that was put into law did change some language about updated policy timelines. And so that is definitely an action step that needs to be taken care of. And then 6A and 6B. So this 6A deals with the percent of schools with an active LSDMC. So taking board feedback from the presentation that we did about what is an active LSDMC. So I'm working with Assistant Superintendent Badgett on this. Right now, 86% means that we have 86% of LSDMCs, and that was as of October the 5th. This would have been LSDMCs who have submitted rosters, who responded to the survey, and who have attended some sort, well, the meeting, I don't know that we've had a meeting yet, but that's factored into that moving forward. So action steps with that one is we've got to make sure that we stick to a definition of active. Active in the past was if you submitted a roster, you're active. So moving forward, active means that you are maintaining a roster, you are conducting mid-year lead agency evaluations, and you're requiring meeting attendance at our district-wide LSDMC meetings. So there needs to be representation from the LSDMC in that. So moving forward, right now, there are some missing rosters that has got that percentage low. Not low, but lower than 100%. And then tracking and scheduling, training for new members. LSDMCs have members who come in and out, and so it's making sure that they are brought up to speed and onboarded, and monitoring completion of that, and then staggered recruitment to maintain continuity. I will say, as a former principal, continuity was hard sometimes because you get people on an LSDMC and it's time for their 2 years and there's not a line waiting for people to come on board. And so that is an action step that was identified. So then 6B is another survey question. This one is the percent of partners or other stakeholders who have a favorable response to their partnership with the district on the district survey. That one's at 71%. That is not a departure of a significant way, one way or the other from in the past. And again, it is early in the school year, so we will see that number go up because action steps are reviewing and enhancing partner communication systems. So that involves sharing the partner database with our Marcoms department to make sure that updates are going out to a broad group of people who actually are engaged. Having regular partner meetings, check-ins to really strengthen relationships and make sure that transparency is occurring. And then also publishing an annual impact report on ongoing initiatives. And that is the end.
Wow, okay, great. You understood my assignment, Mr.
You
Turner,
said
when I
brevity,
I
Dr.
said brevity.
Moffitt,
I was like,
so
okay,
there
that
you
sounds
go.
great. That sounds great. Let's get these board, thank you. Let's get the board member feedback. Board member Craig.
So I'm a couple things, and I'll try to make them quick, most of which are just more comments. I think the helpful as a general comment from, at least from my perspective, is having at least visible some of the past numbers with regards to seeing kind of the history of where some of these things have gone. I think a couple of these numbers are probably, pretty standardly going to be around that same number. But I think about, for instance, the participation, they fluctuate throughout the year as to what those participation numbers look like. And so getting a more historic representation of that will be helpful, and also seeing where we are in comparatively. One thought I wanted to also maybe raise with regards to the infractions and discipline, and I think this goes a little bit back to us defining and being clear about what a Category 2 infraction is and what the results are potentially for Category 2 infractions, because I think we could say Category 2, but I think at schools it's going to be treated slightly different depending upon how much they interpret something to be this specific infraction that's listed. And I recognizing that schools do operate differently based on the nature of what their operations are, but I just think that's another factor, that if we have some schools who are interpreting some things more as an infraction than in other schools, or less as an infraction in other schools, then you may not have the same results. The other note, and I guess this one with regard to chronic absenteeism, and I think this is one of the struggles that we have with this. The percentage of being, like, once you're chronically absent more than a certain amount, even in the first semester, or even in the first quarter for that matter, you're kind of chronically absent for the rest of the year. And at least what we see in the numbers for this year is that our Hispanic numbers are again below our Black students' numbers, and are kind of right in line with our average for the district. That's a helpful sign in some ways, but I also think we can find ways to certainly improve some of that. But I'm wondering if we can kind of see that also from a breakdown of the different types of schools. So whether it's elementary, middle school, or high school. And the reason for that is I think there are different reasons for each. And that might go a little bit more into whatever those appropriate action steps could be. Because if those are, if we're seeing a higher level at the elementary school level, that's an education of parents. That's making sure, we are addressing those things through our social workers and counselors within the school. If that is a high school number that's really high and the elementary school is low, it's a different issue, right?
Good point. Yeah, that's a good point.
The last one I wanted to just kind of inquire about, and I think this goes in line with our kind of what's an active LSDMC versus an inactive LSDMC. I think we've seen a lot of great conversations with some of the LSDMCs and some of their partners and how they build up and the role and that kind of deal. I'm wondering if there's any information that is provided to folks as they're reaching out to grab people from the school or grab parents or grab community leaders as to what that role in LSDMC means and looks like. I raise this because I have a friend who was just recently asked to join her kids' LSDMC, and she reached out to me to find out what an LSDMC member does, and it's a great credit that I'm on this board and all. I probably was not the best person to ask what an LSDMC member commitment would be, because I'm not at their meeting, right? And that particular LSDMC may meet more, may have more requirements, all those type of things, but I think it'd be helpful even if we had like a one-pager that as people are reaching out and grabbing folks, that they're able to share that information with them that would talk about like what is their LSDMC's commitment, what are their meetings scheduled, what are their plans, and it gets them a little bit more organized. Because while some of them are very much in that way, there are others, and I remember when I joined the board, we were looking at that definition of active, and it was like, well, do you have a meeting at all? Right? Like that may not be what we define as active, but it also may be the standard that was set by they have one meeting a year and that's all they needed to do. So, I think some of that information, putting it into some type of one-pager or some type of document will make them be committed to whatever they put on that paper also. So those are just my thoughts. I wanted to be quick about it.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Vice President Bolton, I think you're next.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Just to start with the discipline piece, I don't know if I'm going to say this right, but again, committing infraction to versus it being classified as an infraction to. I think that's where it starts to get strange, and that's why the whole culturally intelligent, culturally sensitive has to play into it, because some of this has to be subjective. And I think that is interesting to someone's, I think to Brandon's point about looking at it school by school begins to be very important to me. But appreciate the data. On the absenteeism, I'm kind of interested for sure regarding gender as well as necessarily racial subgroups to see if there's something there that we can kind of be thinking about. Up at the extracurricular, I'd be interested to see what that percentage in those 20s or early 30s or whatever, what does that look like in comparison to suburban districts that really spend a tremendous amount of effort regarding extracurricular? I think extracurricular has I don't call it cause and effect, but there is a correlation between extracurricular and success academically and in growth. I'll just say this, and everybody knows that I feel this way, and it came up again in finance just, I think, last month. I still do have great reservations about the role that ILTs play in determining extracurricular activities. Because given a choice between having more tutors versus having, a chess club or something, certainly teachers are probably going to predispose that we need more tutors in order to achieve the outcomes. But I really worry about the ILT role and think that we could have greater equity if the ILTs weren't quite so involved with that. And I also have always said that there's an issue with extracurricular as being part of the CFT contract as an addendum. I just think that clouds the whole situation for all of us. And I don't know that it's helping get more teachers to do it anyway. But those are my big issues on that. To Brandon's point, any number of times when we were talking about middle schools, that feeder element that you started with needs to be emphasized. You know, that's how it all starts, is at least in 7th grade, and sometimes much earlier, certainly in the suburbs. The other piece is comparing, if we could, among our schools, you know, to get to that percentage district-wide, what schools have a great deal and what schools don't have a great deal. And it's one of those areas where I think we could do some more work. And I have one question. When we talk about extracurricular, that percentage, and we did this last year too, the last time we talked about this, does that or does that not include those kids that are curricularly taking, let's say, band, an orchestra, or choir during the school day? Is this strictly extracurricular?
So my understanding, and I can verify this because we did talk, as they were talking to me about putting the data together, I believe the comment was made that they were trying to make sure that if it was like band, that the students were doing something outside of the school day.
Besides that.
For that. So if they were in band class, but they didn't do anything outside of the school day with band, then they would not necessarily be counted in that percentage.
And I know we talked about this last year or the last time, and I think that's reasonable to get a real measure for extracurricular. But I also think when you look at the pool of kids that might be doing arts, whether it's performing or what have you, or doing anything athletic or what have you during the school day, that's a pool from which to draw to make the extracurricular, I think, be bigger. It might give us, we spend a significant amount of money on music and gym and PE and all those things. And I would love to see a number too that, okay, here's extracurricular, but we have this many kids taking these sorts of elective courses. I think that would be helpful to even sell our schools. So that's my thoughts, but thank you. It's very interesting, very important stuff.
Thank you.
Thank you. I am going to ask my questions, and I'm going to invite you to give me this information via email, because I'm sure you may not have it right now. If we could go to slide 10, Rob, or start at slide 10. Some of this, with regard to infractions, has historically bothered me because I think the data needs to be disaggregated a lot further. You brought up a point that looking at it from a percentage or just an average number give you typically the same results. And that it just makes me have more questions. So I'm very interested in what schools those are. I'm interested in what grade bands those are. I think that, to me, it just begs more questions. Are we talking about a specific grade? If we're talking about the 5th grade, and that's a testing year, and we have more discipline in that grade, that may offer some explanation, and it will definitely guide your training on the PD side to offset some of the discipline. But I'm very interested in not only the average number of infractions, but the grade band of those infractions and in schools. So, and I mean, you can go down further. Is it a specific principal? Is it a specific teacher? I'm not looking to weaponize that, but I am looking at offering some significant resources to support. I am also curious, are we offering in our PD implicit bias training to our staff around that? If we go to slide, I'm not exactly sure. Can you go to slide 13? I was trying to take notes. When we talked about targeted PD and then the other things that were mentioned, those seem to be heavy on the student side after the student has received the infraction. We're going to do some restorative practices. That sounds more like it's on the student side. Strengthen partnerships with community organizations for mental health. That's again on the student side. I'm looking at the preventative side, and I'm trying to figure out what are we doing on the preventative side to offset some of that. So that's where that question around implicit bias is coming in. And what are we doing to kind of offset the infraction determination? I'm also very curious around disaggregating that data of that number, that's 3 times their white counterparts, are those students with disabilities, taking out some of that information and that data. Is some of that infraction, could that possibly be a manifestation of their disability that's not being categorized accurately? I think that we need to look at some of that disaggregated data, because it's alarming that it is 4 times more, and their Hispanic counterparts are so significantly less, which makes me think, is there an interventive step for our ESL students that they're getting that the other students are not? Again, that would be something that the administration can look at with regard to process and procedures. What is the step, what is the process for some of our ESL students or our Hispanic students? And then what is that in comparative to other students? And then also, are there students with disabilities that are may or may not be receiving some of their services that is categorized correctly? If we go to slide 19, Rob, my questions around chronic absenteeism. Again, I'm interested in, those numbers don't have a huge spread that way, but they do make me wonder, what schools are these? What grades are these students? That should be blaring off the paper that we have a significantly high number. Comparative, Hispanic students is comparative to all students, but where are these Black students going to school that they're chronically absent? Is transportation impacting that? Because we're counting transportation, we're not disaggregating transportation out of that. Are they coming from communities where the bus needs to be fixed because they're getting to school late because the bus is crowded? Those are things that I think the data can tell us that we're simply not, I'd like to have it disaggregated a little bit more. And then you spoke about on slide 20, targeting specific schools with regard to action steps, provide targeted support to focus schools. I'd like to see that around the other guardrail as well, providing targeted support to those schools that have yet to be identified, or I'm sure you already have it, but the identification of schools that have high numbers, and it should be high numbers that are disproportionate to the relative counterpart of the other schools. And then the last thing I'll say is there was one slide, and I don't know the number, but there was one slide that talked about annual reporting, an impact report.
That is the last
Was it the last one?
slide, Rob.
There we go. I was wondering if there could possibly be a semester report or a quarterly report. I'm not exactly sure, but I'm thinking more frequently than annually, so that if there are pivots that need to be made, we could pivot, sorry, not we, the administration could pivot and then provide some corrective or maybe adjust it as needed rather than annually at the end. So those are just some of my thoughts. Again, I'm happy to get my information, my requested information at a later date, but those are things that I'm specifically looking for with the data that you presented that just is glaring to me that there's something else going on. I really do want to thank you for that, though.
Sure.
Board Member Lindy? I'm sorry, I interjected. I usually go last, but I
No,
didn't.
I was still gathering my thoughts. And I wanted, and this may be more of a comment for the superintendent and for my colleagues, but I think, we are carrying over in the goals and guardrails reporting an artifact of a process we're no longer really doing. We're not a part of the governance coaching cohort that does the goals and guardrails. They're not a part of not all of them are a part of the superintendent's evaluation. We're in the process of writing a new strategic plan. And so I think my push was just going to be where the logic stops, we stop. It's like we're diligently going through the motions of something that we more or less stopped doing. And so my proposal would be, I think having a monthly committee of the whole that's focused on student achievement feels incredibly important. I think we should keep it. I think we should just test truly if the things we passed at the board meeting on the 6th of October, in those 5 outcomes for the superintendent, if those really are the most important things we think she needs to be accountable for, I think a good test of whether we're using this time wisely is whether we're spending a meaningful share of these committees of the whole talking about those things. Now, I know there are only 5 of them, and talking about all those every single month might be a bit much. And there's a lot of other stuff in here that's important. But I just think that our systems should evolve as our priorities and our focus evolves. So that I think my request would be that we ask the superintendent for a proposal. And this is not urgent. This could be next month or the next committee of the whole. But if we were to really line up the calendar year's presentations with the things that we just told the administration are most important, continuing also, like, we should have visibility into discipline disparities. Like, I think a lot of these topics really matter. I want to be clear, I'm not suggesting that we drop them, but to build a calendar that reflects what the priorities are, rather than continuing to do the things that we stopped doing a while ago. So that's what I would request.
Okay, Board Member Matt? Oh, I definitely have a comment around what you've shared, but I want Board Member Matt to continue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Turner, for the presentation.
Sure.
As it relates to the data, and I'm not going to reiterate the comments because a lot of the things that were shared were some of the same concerns that I have around the data. But as it relates to interpreting and analyzing this data, this is not something that is just done within the district, but there's also partnership with Children's Hospital, correct?
Correct,
Can
for some of it.
Okay, can you speak about what their support is that they provide, and also maybe in the recommendations, or maybe some of the recommendations that they share based off of the data that they see? I don't know if that's their role or not, but I do believe that there's maybe some like community collective conversation as it relates to the data that you all see together.
Sure, and I think I can answer that by kind of going over the process. So knowing that we were going to present these guardrails today, the owners of the data received, hey, this is the date, we need the data by a certain point. So the 2 areas that I know that have been an ongoing partnership with Children's Hospital have been the ones that deal with chronic absenteeism, very, very much so with chronic absenteeism, and also some in connection with calculating the data for the Category 2 infractions. I will say that the action steps, because Children's deals very heavily on the data side of things, the action steps come from the owner of, so this would be Dr. House and her team with the action steps. I don't know that, and I can verify this, but I don't know that Children's Hospital would have given any action steps that we've shared or given input to that. Where they've been very invaluable, and I won't go into all the technicalities of this, but just to get the per student number for Category 2 infractions for today, Children's helped extrapolate that data to get from, we have this % of Black students, but they make up this % of overall enrollment. And then you do that for each one of the groups, and then you come up with, how do we compare that out? Sometimes just giving a percentage doesn't really tell the story, because sometimes people look at percentages and they just think, well, there's more Black students than white students, and that's why our percentage is higher, but that's really not the case. When you look at it and drill down with the formula that they use, you can compare per student infractions. So they definitely help with that. I also believe with the chronic absenteeism, they were able to go in and help with looking at this at a point in time, which for this meeting was right around October the 5th. So the short answer to your question is they help with the data heavily on the Category 2 calculations to make that understandable and readable. And then on the chronic absenteeism, I believe they helped a little bit, but not as much with the Category 2. But the action steps would come from the actual NCPS owner. they do not offer assistance in any of the other data areas that you saw here today.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
For that insight is really helpful in recognizing the great work that you all do, and really trying to drill down the data, and also having Children's Hospital, who I know is very diligent and
Yes.
rigorous with their data analysis process. So to this point, I do see potential correlation as concerning as it relates to the students' sense of belonging, and correlating to the infraction data as well as the chronic absenteeism data. And so ultimately what that says to me is that there are things that we need to make sure that we're paying attention to, because I do believe that the data can tell a story. And yes, there's a lot of questions that need to be asked as we're analyzing this data, but there's obviously a narrative there that's very alarming, especially for our Black students. And so I'm curious to know, what do you all need from the board? Because I'm looking for us to have a radical change here, because we cannot continue to go on and just say that this is the data, and we're seeing that our students, our Black students specifically, are 3 times higher with Category 2 infractions. And I do believe that there's a lot of work that needs to be done there, as you spoke about, or many of you spoke about, how is this being interpreted? I do think that a lot of our schools need support in that area, as it pertains to maybe classroom management, as it pertains to, again, knowing and identifying what a Category 2 infraction is. And that also helps to, when we're all on one accord, that helps to build the culture. That helps to build that sense of belonging, that I'm not receiving consequences that are disproportionate to the actual situation. And I'm here to tell you, I know that occurs, right? So there needs to be a lot of work in that space. But you all are sharing what your action steps are, and wanting to make sure that I'm operating from a space of governance. What do we need to do as a board to help support in this effort? And that can be, your ideas, that can be from you, Superintendent. We have a mental health policy that very well can support this work here. I do know that Dr. House presented a social and emotional curriculum that would be recommended district-wide, but what is it that we need to do to support in this work and really yield radical results? Going beyond the words are great. Going beyond the actions, action says a lot, but the results are saying more. And so how do we change that narrative?
What I would share, Board Member Mapp, is over the course of time, as we're asking our students and families what they want to see for our school district, is continuing to have the open ear that you have had around this. We have had to make some heavy adjustments financially. It is, and some of the things that maybe people want to see that we've been able to provide in the past, at this point, we've had to make some adjustments. So as we continue moving forward, in some cases, additional dollars at the right time with the right ask would be helpful to us, as it relates to being able in the extracurricular realm to offer more opportunities to our students, giving us a little bit of time to circle through some of the training that we have done in the realm of positive school supports, because we need to give it a little bit of time to work, especially with the level of new staff, new teachers, new systems that we have in place moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And so all of these systems are expected to work in collaboration with one another, in tandem with one another?
Absolutely.
Okay. My only ask would be, I think you did a great job, Mr. Turner, presenting this information, and you spoke about a lot of the work is specific to Dr. House's work under the positive school culture, if she would be able to come and present on the work that is being done specifically around these action steps.
Sure.
And if I could say, just from a process, oops, sorry, I have more trouble with this microphone. I should just yell every meeting. From a process standpoint, my view of, you asked how the board could help. I think the conversations that have occurred, and to go to Board Member Lindy's point about, do we still need the guardrails? I'm not passing judgment one way or the other about do we still need the guardrails, but my view in seeing this in the past and coming into this role is we've almost gotten into a box of what is presented, because we've had the strategic plan. I have gone back, trust me, and poured through 2 or 3 years of presentations to get patterns of what has been presented. And almost without exception, what the guardrail says is what is being presented, right? And so then you go in, like if it asks for black versus white students or male, but if it doesn't ask for gender, then that's not what's been presented by the last administration, this administration, because I think that's what the document said to do, right? So what I've heard, and it goes in line with what Superintendent Murphy said from what she said about a very boots on the ground implementation, a common theme that I've heard from the comments here today is if we could like visualize this big sheet that showed all of this data today, but have it disaggregated by school, so you see the patterns of not just globally, but how are the elementary students compared to middle school to high school in discipline or in chronic absenteeism? But because of the format that the strategic plan with the guardrails in particular have forced, so to me, it's for the board, what would help me is for the board to say, this is the format we really would like. And if it's moving away from the guardrails and Superintendent Murphy is tasked with presenting it a different way, then that's where I work with all of the owners to make sure it's presented in that way. With the guardrails, it's not clean like it is with our testing, right? The academic side. The academic side, they take the benchmark, they take the end of course, whatever it may be, the third grade reading, and you get that number. Now, again, it may not be final until it's final because of school year students versus not. But with this, I mean, I will just say that, and thanks to the people who did this, the hours upon hours that were used to come up with the data, and I'm not talking about me, I'm talking about people giving me the data and all of the conversations back and forth. People really took this seriously, but they're taking it at a point in time which just happened to be the first week in October. And that's part of the monster of the guardrail data, is it changes constantly. So like next month, if this is what we do, we'll be presenting the first round of our fall benchmarking, right? Well, that's at a point in time, and it comes out of a program. People can do action steps, but the data is easy for that. It's interpreting the action steps but guardrails, guidance on what is the path forward, because it's been tied to presentations for 2 or 3 years based on what was in the strategic plan.
Okay.
Hopefully that makes sense.
I think it makes a lot of sense based off what I'm hearing you say. I'm wondering, to that point, as you talked about the board sharing or inquiring about different data points, right, and having it disaggregated out, I do believe that there has to be a focus on something, or we will be distracted. But I'm wondering if there is a way for you all to kind of provide a more holistic presentation of the data, so that we can maybe have it available to us, maybe kind of based off of some of the questions that were presented. If it is disaggregated by schools or by grade bands, that is helpful. And then I think in terms of the board work, we identify what to specifically, target and focus on, so that we can see that that progress with the overall data points. But again, when I see this data come back, it is alarming, it is blaring, and like I said, we do have to take a radical approach to begin to move the needle forward. So that's all I
appreciate.
Thank you. Vice President Bolton?
Yeah, I would follow up on just a few things. I do believe that from this day forward, so to speak, the goals that we should be emphasizing are the new goals for which we're holding the superintendent accountable. And if I reflect on the dialogue that we had at the committee, at the retreat, when I mentioned absenteeism, I think everybody said, well, that was a guardrail. And so I think it might not be a bad idea if we are going to move to just these new goals versus the old goals. Well, maybe the board does need to talk about which guardrails to preserve and which ones not to, because I think those were very valuable into how to achieve it, or as values. I don't want just the goals. I like some value clarification for the superintendent and the administration as well. And I do think that makes sense. The problem with aggregate and versus disaggregate is that we are interested in the disaggregate information, but the way we do the goals and the measures, it's all about aggregate. And so somewhere in there, maybe the administration and smarter people than me can figure out how you mix and match, combine, develop both the aggregate and disaggregate. As a matter of fact, in finance, 3 years ago, if I recall, I think it was President Moffitt that started talking about per school, even in the financial picture of things versus the aggregate. Now, for us, we have to stay at the aggregate level, because that's where we must stay, but still, to better understand and better move along, we do need and have a want for the disaggregate information as best we can. So I think as the administration's asked for changes, that can be part of how they can maybe proceed as to how we can have both to a certain extent. But I'm all in favor of moving to those 5 goals rather than the old ones. And for Mr. Lindy, the idea that it might be 5 of the same thing, it doesn't seem like there'll be enough time. And remember that all of those are big, as you know, and more particularly, we can be using this time in our strategic planning, because one of those goals is the administration to come up with a strategic plan. So all of this is very good, and I think it's time to move to these new goals. But how we balance aggregate versus disaggregate, we have to kind of break loose of the measures quite so much right now to be able to go to the disaggregate. I think that would be helpful for the board.
So I just want to, Board Member Crossett. So I just want to kind of weigh in on, if you all will recall, when I first got on the board in 2022, I think the only one that may not remember is Board Member Mapp, but we had Student Achievement Committee. And the Student Achievement Committee measured things like academic achievement. It measured bullying. It measured it monitored those things. We have boiled this down now to a SACAL, which is a Student Achievement Committee of the Whole. And I don't have a problem necessarily with the goals and guardrails. We can call it something else, but this is the type of data that I believe we should hold the administration accountable for. I don't want to get away from measuring discipline data. I don't want to get away from measuring the disparity between Black students, white students, males, females. I believe in order for us to hold the administration accountable for something that is tied to, it can be tied to state standards, we need to ask them to monitor it. That's the best way to ensure that it's being looked at and held, that they're held accountable for. And a regular cadence of the data is what we should be expecting. So I don't care if we call it something different. But that number should be going somewhere in the negative. I mean, it should be going down, and it's not. And so we've been monitoring it for several years, and we are now able to say with certainty that we're watching it move either one way or the other. But holding them accountable to the data is what I think we're expected to do. In the best interest of time, I'm not interested in reducing our time to get rid of the monitoring of this data, because this is exactly tied to student outcomes. And I don't understand how, if we all agree that student outcomes is our collective focus, the things that impact student outcomes, we're not going to regularly hold the accountable for, and the administration accountable for in measuring. Absenteeism is it is a national concern. We need to be looking at it regularly. So I'm all for calling it something different, but I'm not for taking it away in the best interest of, we're trying to decrease the time so that we can have fewer meetings. This is important information. This is data that I think we need to hold the administration accountable to, and it needs to be monitored on a regular basis. And so my expectation is, and I will support us maintaining this level of accountability on a regular basis. I don't know what we're going to call it, but that's just my 2 cents about it. So, Board Member Crossett.
Thank you. Mr. Turner, thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
And also, I just wanted to thank the whole administration. I think the presentations we've had since the school year began with the middle school principals and the assistant superintendents have all been helpful. I can tell that you guys put a lot of time and effort into these presentations, so thank you for that. I also think that we're getting closer and closer to getting with these presentations, we're getting a little closer and closer for the board to maybe be a little bit more on the same team as the administration. I think that'll helpful. It doesn't mean we don't hold you accountable. It's just we can get all our oars paddling in the same direction. I also appreciate this presentation today because it's kind of good data early in the year. I think it helps get us a heads up, which I think is helpful. I agree with President Moffitt that these are a lot of good data points that we don't want to give up. I don't want to throw out the baby with the bathwater, but I do agree we should focus on the 5 goals that the superintendent has, but it could be that many of these data points that we're collecting will be good data points to add up to or roll up to the 5 major goals. So I agree with, keeping as many data points as we can collect that are relevant would be important. And I think we can look at that as we evolve the strategic plan as we go on during this school year. I did want to, I think in general, I'm probably going to echo everybody's comments, but this is just my view of data from my experience in the business world. But the aggregate data is very important, but in order to really understand where the issues are with the aggregate data, you got to granulate the data. And I think I would granulate all of it all the time, because otherwise you can't really figure out why there's a problem. And I think it's important to remember that all of these data presentations should be the beginning of a conversation, and that the answer to the question why we are at these data points is the conversation. And so I would just keep that in mind with all of the guardrails and the goals that we work on. And I think that's a way of discerning the aggregate and the disaggregate information is you gotta break it down to understand why there's problems. For example, it may not be that you're going to collect data that's just raw data. You're probably going to have to, for example, on favorable student belonging, I think you got to collect data on why somebody chooses not to be favorable, if it's possible, like in a comments, or why they don't like their teacher and whatever the calculation was about whether or not they felt favorable about their teacher. I think in the infraction 2 data, I don't know if you can granulate the type of infraction to understand why there might be one, as well as, the school and the grade level would be important on that as well. I don't know if you necessarily have to present all the granulated data, but if you have it and you look at it and you see a trend, or you see a underlying reason, that's going to be what's going to be important. How to answer the question why is going to be really important to going forward with this. So those are my comments, but thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Board Member Craig.
Again, I'll try and be quick because I'm trying to get us to set some records here today. I would offer kind of two thoughts. One is with regards to the guardrails. I think we discussed it a little bit at the retreat, but I do think until we establish we set goals for the superintendent for this next year, but until we really establish what our longer term solution will be, I don't think it's necessarily harmful to kind of continue looking at some of what our guardrails were, and especially given that most of which are things that we are just kind of guidance to keep us in line with where our direction would be as a district. Again, I respect the idea of also like recognizing and reviewing them and making a decision as to what are those things that require reporting out on, and what are those things that require us to get kind of a different level of update or a different schedule to the update. And I think that's something that we can figure out at a different time. But I think that's fine. I want to bring a little bit of caution, and I want to echo a little bit of what Vice President Bolden said, but I think maybe in a different manner. I think it is important for us to be able to grab as much data as possible at times to really make educated decisions on things. I think where my struggle comes also is that sometimes we're going to get so far into what each decision is with the data that we may not make a decision. And so what I would ask, just as us as a board, that I have no problem with us getting more data. Again, I asked for some additional points of data, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But for that, we as a board commit, though, that we do something with that data when we get it. Because what we've done year after year after year is get a bunch of data, and then we as a board take a year and a half to figure out what we want to do with that data and what we want to do as a result of that data. And I think that's not fair to the team who spends so much time gathering all that information to bring to us, and then we take a long time making a decision. Because there are a lot of things that, especially given our budget concerns that we will have over the next few years, that we will need really quick decisions on as a board. And so I think if the superintendent and her team is able to put together that information and give us a broader picture of some of the things that we've asked for, that we then make very quick decisions that allow them to move forward and spend the majority of their time implementing the things that they're working hard to do, or that they've brought to us, or that we've suggested and made decisions on. And I say that in part because, again, I said this about our budget, and I'm happy to see we were starting earlier on that, but I think we're going to have hard decisions on that. I think we're going to have hard decisions on a lot of things, and having meeting after meeting after meeting where we're just discussing it over and over again is us getting stuck in the details, as opposed to the governance level of then making the direction and then holding those folks accountable. If we don't achieve, they don't reach the marks that we say is where we want to see, then we hold them accountable for that. But I just think it's on us to do something with the data if we're asking for all this data.
All right.
Just real quick.
Okay. Superintendent Murphy.
Just for the board's consideration and my thoughts, listening to everyone, regardless of your decision or direction, we will continue to collect this data because all of these data pieces help us with instructional outcomes. My and is if there is consideration that the team will be working on a new strategic plan, allowing us that time to be able to build that work would be extremely helpful and would be what my ask is.
You mean allow, can you expand on what you're talking about with regard to allow you the time to, in lieu of this, you're saying?
We will continue to collect this data, and we can, a couple of board meetings from now, we plan to share our dashboard and our scorecard. It's data we can include in our dashboard and scorecard as we're collecting it, if that is acceptable to the board. Allowing us to do that would then give us time to work on the new strategic plan that we have to develop to begin to share with you the work that we're doing.
I'm still a little confused because we haven't decided to change anything. So all of this should still be presented every month until we decide collectively to
Yeah,
change
no
it.
problem.
So,
We will continue to do that. I
or
was trying to
report it
say
out, I
that,
think.
I'm sorry.
No, I'm saying report it back out because much of this is already data that's collected anyway, correct?
Yes.
So are you saying you want, you're requesting to not present it? But it's still going to be collected, but you would.
We would still collect it, we would still share it with you, maybe in a written form, as opposed to a full presentation, thus saving us a little bit of preparation and time so that we can spend that time working on our new strategic plan. It's a repurposing of how we use our day-to-day time.
Well, I think we can definitely talk about it more collectively at a board member. At a board meeting, I'm not in favor of that. That's just my personal opinion. I think until we decide to formally change it, we should maintain what we have. And I don't think there was a request to formally change anything right now. It's still the goals that we set regarding the superintendent, those 5 goals that we decided on. And until we formally change the goals and guardrails, we're just going to continue to monitor this. But we can bring it up at a board meeting if you all would like to continue the discussion. My understanding is we're going to just continue to do all of this, and we're working on the strategic plan in addition to that. But what are your thoughts very quickly, board members? Board Member Crossett was
Yeah,
first.
Board Member Craig is aware of this too. We have a dashboard system for the internal audit group, and the dashboards are pretty flexible. So it could be that we got a dashboard now that relates to our goals and guardrails and the 5 goals that we have now, but as the strategic plan changes, these dashboards can adjust. So I think, is that what you're talking about primarily, Superintendent?
It's okay, it seems like we're not there. I was hearing a mix of some ideas and some thoughts, and I was trying to pull those together so that we could get both, and that the administrative team would have time to also be able to work on the future. But
So let's talk about it offline, you and I, and then we can present something with a little clearer thought. Let me go to Vice President Bolton, and then we'll go to Board Member Lindy.
Where I am is the idea that we've moved to these new goals. And I think that's what governance teaches us to focus. But I don't know as a board whether or not we've decided to rid ourselves of the guardrails. So I think there needs to be dialogue about guardrails. But I don't want to do these goals and more goals. I think the concept of governance was to focus on those things. And so I'm more than willing to move to new goals, but have a discussion about what guardrails, if any guardrails, continue. Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Lindy?
Thanks. I just think the more we ask the administration to do, the harder we make their lives. And the more we put in, the more we dilute people's focus. We have a great set of 5 clear outcomes for this year. They are ambitious. 4 out of the 5 of them are ambitious. I voted against one of them. But at least 4 of them are very ambitious. And I think that coming up with a good version of the strategic plan will answer these questions for future years. I would rather see us invest the time to do that work well than do none of those things well. So I am totally for the administration coming back with a proposal. I don't pretend to know the right way to thread this needle, particularly because it's not as though the things in the guardrails don't matter. They do matter. And I think it would not be responsible of us to pay no attention to them for the next 8 or 9 months. But where exactly to strike that balance, I do think the administration would have a good perspective on that. I'm one board member, but that's my position. Thanks.
Well, thanks, team. I guess I'm a little confused because this is having sat through the very lengthy process that we developed around the goals, the guardrails, and all of that. A few years ago, this same board was just gung-ho that we have goals, we have these guardrails, and we develop a strategic plan. So I'm a little confused that that was the expectation then, and now all of a sudden we are deferring to, let's just get rid of. I have not said that I'm willing to, I said I'm willing to let them be called something different, and there should still be a report out of that. I'm not convinced that just simply a dashboard with no explanation or no formalized presentation is sufficient when there may or may not be questions. Where is the accountability piece to that? Particularly since there was an accountability piece for the previous administration around the same thing. So I'm just a little confused. But I would like to take some time to talk about it with the administration so I can understand exactly what they're proposing and have them propose something formally to us as a board when we would be voting on it more collectively. I do think the goals are definitely appropriate. I think that these matter, but I think I'm getting mixed signals from my colleagues, having sat through for a couple of years this very lengthy process to get here, and now all of a sudden we're deferring a little differently by the same people that got us here. So I'm just a little confused. Board Member Matt?
Yes. My thoughts on this is me asking the questions that I asked in terms of what can we do as a board is really coming from the lens of really focusing on our students. Because again, we continue to see presentation after presentation where there is vast concern there, at least for me. And so I don't want us to get hung up on, it should be this way, it should be that way. I want us to be able to find a solution so that we are really impacting our students from a lens that is going to yield the best academic and holistic outcomes. And so I do believe that whatever the goals are, whatever the guardrails are or values are, they do have to be monitored regularly. I'm a firm believer in if you do not attend to the thing that you're trying to change, there won't be any transformation at all. So you have to put attention there. So whatever we decide upon, yes, we have to monitor it regularly. It has to be monitored with fidelity. And this, my comment was all about accountability. I do not want us to continue to be distracted by how we do this or whatever the recommendations are. I want us to really make sure that we are looking at what is going to yield the best outcomes for our students, because we cannot afford to wait any longer. And that's my perspective on it. Again, I do think there should be goals. I do think that there should be some guardrails in place, because again, that's also what the community has presented to us. This is their values. And so I want to make sure that I uphold that. And as I talked about before, there is correlation in the data for me. Sense of belonging, connected to infractions or discipline, connected to chronic absenteeism, which ultimately connects to achievement. So we have to do something that is going to be intentional, purposeful, and that is really going to be solution-oriented to yield those outcomes positively for our students. So that was what my feedback was about.
Okay. Mr. Turner, I hate to have had you stand there. I'm so
No, it's
sorry
okay.
throughout this whole conversation. I definitely think we have things to work on as a board, and you all send me your thoughts via email, and we can continue the discussion on Monday at our upcoming board meeting, if you like. And otherwise, is there anything else around new business that board members have? Other business? All right. Well, then I think we're doing good. Have a great night, everyone. I'll join us at our next board meeting on Monday, October the 20th. Oh, I'm sorry. We got to vote. We got to. I take a motion to.
Motion to adjourn.
The meeting. Any discussion? Everybody in favor? Mr. Gustin?